Hello viewers, I think it's fair to say that Gran Turismo is very well known for the amount of cars it has in each of its games, and Gran Turismo 7, whilst not having as many as Gran Turismo 5 or 6, does have a fair amount of different cars and different manufacturers. However, it seems to have a fairly big issue at the moment, particularly with one brand, and that brand is Nissan. And for those that don't know which one that is, it's the one down there. The Nissan GTR being quite easily the most overpowered car in Group 3 at this current time. When you go to choose your manufacturer affiliation, Nissan is the very obvious choice. Now, it's not only the Group 3 car that's overpowered, but also the Group 4 car, which you could say is actually better in its class than the Group 3 car. So why is it that this category or these categories are dominated by one brand? Well, let's find out. The real reason comes down to the BOP. We're going to jump into the Group 4 GTR. This was a recent Watkins Glen race, 5 laps, and you can see the sheer amount of GTRs dominating the leaderboard. In fact, it wasn't until position 34 that we saw a car that wasn't the GTR. And within the top 100, there are only 6 cars that weren't the Nissan GTR. So it just shows you the domination that this car is presenting. And in this race, there was only 1, 2, 3, 4. There's only 4 cars out of the 16 that weren't the GTR. And therefore, you can see that this, in some senses, produces a bit of a problem because, well, we like to be able to use the full range of cars in the game, ideally, but the price you pay for not using this car is that you will be horrifically off the pace. And, well, that is quite an issue in a racing game. So initially here, I'm actually going to have quite a poor exit out of turn 1, immediately lose a position and go down. You see the car behind, the Audi TT, and there was once a time where the Audi TT was actually a solid car in this class. But I think in recent months it's become quite apparent that the balance of performance that's supposed to make all of the cars equal to some extent isn't really working, and is very much favouring the Nissan brand. And in some ways there isn't too much of an issue with that, because it means everyone's in the same car and you know that it's all down to driver ability, and that can be seen as a positive. But I think overall it would be better if the BOP was a lot more balanced and we could use realistically a wider range of cars within the game. And I suppose it's one of those things where, because people see the GTR setting the top time, you know, the top 10 times are dominated by this car, more people are going to jump into it, and it just creates this snowball effect. But back to this race, you can see here it's a good battle between those of us here in the top 6 or 7. Found myself up into 5th, looking up the inside. Actually, there's going to be a penalty there, up into 4th. Now looking for, therefore, 3rd into this one. Late on the brakes, up the inside we go, and we're going to claim the position. Now you're probably wondering, well, why is this car so fast in Group 4? And the main reason is, I think, is the straight line speed. It's handling. There are cars that are better handling wise. I think the Subaru WRX probably a better handling car, so on some tracks actually the WRX might be a bit quicker. Here we actually go for the overtake, a bit of contact with the car behind, we get the move done. But it is the top end speed that really sets this car apart from the rest of the cars in this division, and until that is kind of fixed, it's not going to be a very fair class at all. So you see the guy in P2 there making a mistake, getting a penalty, and I was gaining. I had a chance of P2 here, but unfortunately for me, I had a distinct lack of talent for a moment and got a penalty, dropping me down to P3, ultimately finishing on the podium. And you can see the domination by the GTR. In fact, the first car that isn't a GTR is in 8th place, way down the order, and yeah, 8 out of 10 cars there are Nissans. I decided to improve my qualifying time and choose a different car. Now, there's not many cars that can really challenge the Nissan, but I went for the Alfa. This is in Group 4, I would say one of the regular challengers to the throne, you could say. And my lap times were a little bit off, maybe about half a second, and this is a comparison between the Alfa on the left and the Nissan GTR on the right hand side, and you see the speed differences. This is really where the other cars just cannot keep up, and on the straight line section, up the hill especially. As we head towards the braking zone of the chicane, you can see the top end speed is so much higher in the GTR. As we brake, about 6 miles an hour higher, and it doesn't sound like a lot, but trust me, in a racing context, when a car behind has 6 miles an hour advantage, it's going to be really difficult to keep that car behind you. And that became very apparent here. Now, the Alfa actually had a really good launch off the line, so as you can see, immediately jumping up from 5th into 4th. And that was one advantage, I suppose, the Alfa had over the Nissan. But this is where you can see the Nissan comes into its own, because as we come through the uphill S's onto the back straight, I have got a bit of tow from the car in front, but the car I just overtook is going to come flying back past, and there's not much I can do to prevent this from happening. As you can see, easily sailing by well before we even get to the braking zone of the chicane, and it's really, really difficult to try to race against that, to fight against that advantage when you just have not as much straight line speed. And for me, that is the key reason why the GTR in Group 4 is so fast. It's just this pure straight line speed, really hard to overcome that in a race, and therefore also in qualifying as well. So here I find myself in P6, my natural habitat, trying to secure, let's say, at least an improvement upon my starting position. I started 5th, let's try and get into the top 4, that would be good, I think. And it's a nice little challenge trying to beat the Nissan in a different car. Now here, we slam it up the inside, move back into P5, back to where we started, and now it's really a case of keeping on the tail of these cars in front. I'm going to really have to rely on the slipstream down the back straight to compensate for the lack of top end speed in this car. And in towards turn 1, I think this gives you again another really good example. Through the first corner, I think we both carried about the same amount of speed through there. As we head into the S's, it's fairly level through this section. As we come through here, you see the gap's about the same. Then as we go through this right-hander onto the straight, this is where the Nissan really begins to stretch its legs and extend that advantage. As you can see, it's opening up maybe 1 or 2 car lengths by the time we get onto the brakes, and that is really difficult to overcome. When it comes to handling, you know, if a car handles badly, sometimes there's something you can do. You can drive a little bit differently, but when it comes to top speed, there's very little you can do to try to overcome it. So annoyingly here, you get handed a 0.5 second penalty, which seemed a bit silly because I drifted wide and I lost time anyway. And it's just one of those classic Gran Turismo penalties where they get dished out when you already penalised yourself by doing something bad or wrong, and there wasn't any other victim other than myself. But there you go, sometimes that happens. Now as we ride round the penultimate corner into the final turn, lap number 2, I've still got some chance here of getting maybe even onto a podium, and as I said earlier, it's quite a fun challenge trying to keep up and trying to beat these cars if possible. You have to be very, very mindful and very tactical with how you approach the race. Onto back straight, lap number 3. Can we make an impression this time around? So close in the slipstream, right onto his tail, less than maybe half a metre behind. And again, even with the slipstream, it isn't enough. The Nissan there is going to slowly edge away. So it just shows you, you know, with that much strong slipstream, even still, could barely keep up. And I mean, let alone go for an overtake. So we're waiting for that mistake. 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, all fairly close in contention with each other, and therefore all I got to do really kind of stay in this position and just wait for the moment that they make some sort of error, and it looks like they made a bit of contact there. I'm going to push the red car, try and follow through on the inside and gain a position here, albeit temporarily, because we have a penalty to serve just around this corner. The penalty zone is here. So as we drop down back into 5th, the car behind also serving a penalty, so not losing another position, but losing some crucial time. I think it's quite crucial now to have a really good final sector to try to just keep within slipstream range of those guys in front. On to lap 4, 2 to go. Can we do anything about improving our position any further? It's been quite a weird race. The guy in the lead easily running away. 2nd, 3rd and 4th have been really close but not really engaged in combat as of yet. But that might be about to change as we head towards the chicane for the 4th time. The Spaniard going quite defensive on the inside. In fact, it actually resolved quite peacefully as the Brit goes back into P4. But we're still searching, still hunting for an improvement in position. It's not quite coming yet. We're just waiting for that opportune moment to perhaps go for the move. And, well, there we go. I'm not sure what that was, but he just slowly drifted into the wall. Really unexplainable crash, that one. I'd love to know exactly what happened there, but it looked like it got a wheel on the grass, but even still, just slid wide, had the handbrake on, and meets the wall. Up into 4th. Is there a chance of 2nd? Perhaps. Well, we're going to have to wait for some sort of incident right up to the back of the red car here. Are we going to be able to get this move done? We could send up the inside. The worry I have is you go for the move, you lose time, you lose ground to the car in front, and then you lose slipstream, and then you're a sitting duck onto the straight once again. So that's the tactical element of racing a faster car. You do have to be very mindful of when you make these overtakes, rather than just sending them in. Looking here, actually the Spaniard's going to go for it on his fellow Spaniard. And it's going to be side by side now through the S's, lap number 5, and this is where both of their races unravel as they make contact here on the left hand side. The green car is sent spinning round, and somehow I've darted up into P2, but we're still going to be vulnerable here up the back straight towards the chicane, trying to break the toe as best as possible. The GTR is coming back at me, but we're going to be able to get into the corner in a safe 2nd. So now it's a case of trying to focus forward, setting a nice lap, and moving away from those cars behind. But this race was really a lesson in consistency and patience. I knew that I never really had the chance to just easily sail by these cars. That wasn't going to be realistically possible for me. All I had to do really was stay in position, wait, and bide my time and hope that they'd make mistakes. That's exactly what happened. So I had to play it smart. But it's not over just yet. The guy behind is never going to quite give us a rest until the race is truly over. The guy in the lead has actually done a really good job here, winning by over 6 seconds. So quite easily the fastest player on the track at the moment. Lapping in the mid 52s, whereas my fastest lap is a low 54, so 1.5 seconds difference. And that is not a minor time gap at all. So through the last couple of corners, managed to keep my cool and not make any further errors and bring home a 2nd place. I think that's quite a satisfying result up against quite easily the overpowered car in Group 4. Apologies for how many times I've said that, but it's quite a good look to have beaten as many as we did there. Not a first, but still 2nd is in many ways a victory. Now let's take a look at Group 3, as this category is also dominated by Nissan, but perhaps not to the same extent as Group 4. As you can see, still dominated by the Nismo GT3, but there are certainly a few more different cars in the top 100 compared to the Watkins Glen race we just did. So it's good to see a bit more variety, but still GTR definitely needs taming, and it's for the same reason. Straight line speed is far too good in this car, and it just has general good stability. So I whipped out my Nissan GTR, and we're going to jump into the Mount Panorama Group 3 race to see how it performs. And here we're going to set a lap to put us in a favourable position on the grid. And as I said, it's the straight line speed which really is the strength of this car. Mount Panorama has 2 very long straights. Even through the mountain section, which is quite twisty, undulating, this is still not a bad car. It's actually a very stable car, given it's, you know, it's quite a chunky thing. So it has a lot of stability. But we start in P4. Now you see, again, lots of GTRs. In fact, the majority of cars there are GTRs. And that's basically the current Gran Turismo 7 landscape, Group 3 and Group 4. That's what you are going to find, essentially, is the majority going for this car. But that's how it is. We're going to have to make the most of what we've got and try to move up as many positions as we can. Now this race was fairly interesting because we had a Mustang up in P2 and it was putting up a very brave fight, I think it's fair to say. Now even down this back straight, which is supposed to be the strong territory of the Nissan, the Mustang actually more than held its own, and it wasn't easy to try to overtake that car. As you can see, pretty much neck and neck between the two of them. And as they were side by side, I thought I'd slam it up the inside, making a bit of contact there with the Frenchman in the Mustang, but moving up into third. Now it's my turn to try to challenge the non-Nissan. Always a brave choice, but it's always good to see. And I must say that, you know, when I see people not driving the dominant car, I do think, you know what, fair enough. I respect that choice, that you've done that, and you're going to, you know, you're going to go for it in something that is, in most cases, going to be harder and more difficult to do. Now, the Mustang actually got really good traction there off of turn 1, so we're definitely not going to be close enough to go for this move into the second corner. Likewise, the car behind not close enough to me, so this one is going to be quite a safe corner, you would presume. But unfortunately for the car in front, the next couple of corners are not going to be the safest. Fast sweeping left into a slower left, coming right up, and unfortunately, as you can see, carries way too much speed and meets our good friend Australian Barrier on the outside. We're going to move up into second. A few laps later, coming in to change from the medium tyre over to the hard. You had to use both in this race. And from here it was quite a simple affair really, because I was in an easy second, but then the guy, the Ukrainian, was on the better tyre. And so I had to really defend, work quite hard to try to keep this position, but felt like with 3 laps left to go, it was always going to be really difficult to try to keep a fast car at bay. Here I could because it was on the outside, but with a nice little switcheroo, the Ukrainian managed to get to my left-hand side, heading towards the left of turn 1, and that was that. I wasn't really able to fight that one too much. And ultimately at the end of the race, finishing in P3 with a Nissan GTR 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In fact, the top 12 are all GTRs apart from one Supra. But there we go, guys. Please do let me know your thoughts on the current state of the BOP in this game. Definitely could do with a lot of work, I think that's fair to say. But thank you so much for watching. I shall catch you next time. Goodbye.